Commonwealth's attorneys and I have concluded that the NCAA sanctions were overreaching and unlawful.
Someone's got to develop a product that you and I as a consumer are going to want to buy.
The country needs a comprehensive energy plan.
Welcome to another edition of For the Record. Our guest today is Congressman Glenn Thompson. Congressman, welcome.
Steve, it's good to see you.
I've not seen you since election night, and I think that's a good place for us to start. First of all, congratulations on your win.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity and privilege to continue to work for the folks here in Center County and the entire 5th District for another 2 years.
Now, you were successful in your candidacy. Senator Casey was reelected in Pennsylvania as well, and also President Obama was reelected.
It was a good night for incumbents.
It was a good night for incumbents, and that brings me to the next question. Where do we go from here? Because nothing really changed in D.C.
No, it didn't. It was kind of interesting. I'd heard some statistics where, as a part of this election, there was just an amazing amount of money that was spent for political ads. Almost, basically over a million ads run nationwide, and we got the same government we started out with.
And now, in November, normally election time is sort of the end. You come back for a little bit of work in the December period. But this year was unique because you had many things to tackle, including the dreaded fiscal cliff.
Yeah, although I have to tell you from my first, my first election in 2008, being sworn in 2009, it's been, we've broken all the rules in terms of what normally occurs. And specifically this year, there normally is just a bit of a break between the end of the 112th Congress, where after the election, we do come back after the election to 2 weeks later to reorganize. That usually takes 7-10 days. We welcome the member-elects. They do their orientation, they select their offices, and then we go home and then come back in January. Well, that did not occur. It was seamless from the 112th, 113th. In fact, honestly, for the most part, other than the swearing in that happened on Thursday, I really couldn't tell you when one stopped and the other started.
Now, what kind of tenuous sort of arguments were going on when it came time to discussing where things were with the levels of where the income levels were, et cetera, about taxes? How much were you involved in that?
Well, we were all very much involved in it. The bottom line is taxes on every American were going to go up, and that was a result of an action by Congress, nothing I served with. It was the men and women who served in Congress in 2001 and 2003. And as I'm quick to point out, most of them are either retired or dead. And so, unfortunately, they failed to make those lower tax rates that they reduced in 2001, 2003 permanent. And that's what we're faced with. Come New Year's Eve at midnight, everybody's taxes were going to go up. And in fact, everybody's taxes did go up. Part of that was the process of how we worked on it. Initially there was a round of discussions that involved Speaker Boehner and President Obama. And President Obama just didn't want to negotiate. He was intent that everybody's taxes, if you make under $200,000, your taxes will be locked in. We locked in a lower rate. But anybody that made $200,000 or more, your taxes would go up. Now, the big problem I had with that is that's a lot of small businesses, individuals that are organized their businesses as sole proprietorships, limited liability corporations, S corps. That's a lot of jobs that are provided, and in fact, in the end, it took going to the president just couldn't get it done. I give a lot of credit to Vice President Joe Biden and Minority Leader McConnell in the Senate. They actually came up with a framework that I could agree to that really locked in, not just for another 2 years, but permanently, lower tax rates for 99.3% of Americans.
So now the highest rate will be for people that make $400,000 a year?
Files individually, $450,000 if you file jointly. That's still going to impact some small business owners, but for the most part, we've protected and insulated a lot of job creators, since that's where anyone that makes $400,000 or more will return to the tax rates that they paid during the Bill Clinton era.
And that's for income, correct? That's not for investment.
That's for income. On the investment side, we actually locked in a lower dividend rate, which is incredibly important, especially for our senior citizens. You think about it, if you work hard your whole life, you plan for your retirement, and you're looking forward to basically living off the interest or the dividends from your investments. Excuse me. We were able to lock in, not just for an extension, but permanently a lower tax rate on those folks. We also did the same thing on the death tax or the estate tax. That was scheduled to go to 55% and just a $1 million asset exemption. If you're a small business owner or a family farmer, it's not hard to accumulate $1 million in assets. And so the fact is that we were able to lock it in permanently at 40% and a $5 million asset exemption. That's good. That's good for a lot of folks. I was very pleased with really what was the privilege to vote for that. And on top of it, we got a permanent repeal of an important, a big part of the Obamacare, where the Class Act was permanently defunded and repealed from the Affordable Care Act.
Now, another thing that was brought up in the last Congress was the vote in the House, especially about Hurricane Sandy relief. You want to talk about the difference there between the 1 week it was voted on by one group of congressmen, the next week it was voted on by the other people?
Yeah, what we have voted on, because tomorrow there'll be another vote. We just voted on funding, extending the funding level for the National Flood Insurance. The fact is that, this country, we've had our share of natural disasters. It occurs on a regular basis. Now, I always thought it was kind of interesting. They consider that emergency funding. They don't budget for it, despite the fact that every year, somewhere in the country, we have tornadoes and floods and hailstorms and, all types of natural disasters. I think we could do a better job of just budgeting for these reoccurring costs, but they don't. And so what we did was provide some funding to the National Flood Insurance Program so that that program would do what it's supposed to do. It doesn't usually make people whole, but it keeps people from basically bankruptcy. Tomorrow we'll be voting on a bill specifically for related to Hurricane Sandy. So it's mostly New Jersey, New York. Pennsylvania had some costs there. And the fact is that it's important that we do that, but they had all kinds. It was like a Christmas tree. Some of the things that they were putting into that bill originally coming out of the Senate was like $61 billion. There was things like, one of the roofs in the Smithsonian Museum needed replaced. Well, that was not storm related. That should be dealt with in the regular budget, not put into an emergency spending bill that frankly doesn't count towards the budget. We need to be accountable in putting things towards the budget. There was also some loan relief going back to Hurricane Katrina, long ways from New Jersey and New York, where Sandy did its most damage. And so I think we're going to see a bill that's cleaned up and really is honest with the American people. And I'm not saying that those things probably aren't important to deal with, but not in an emergency spending bill for Hurricane Sandy that really doesn't have a lot of accountability when it comes to the budget.
That's a good stopping point for us. When we come back, we'll talk about what's coming up in this session with Congressman Glenn Thompson. You're watching For the Record on WHVL. And welcome back to For the Record. Our guest is Congressman Glenn Thompson. Congressman, the new Congress, every 2 years you have to vote for a speaker.
That's right.
And Speaker Boehner was reelected this time. And what was your vote on that?
Oh, I voted for John Boehner for Speaker of the House. I've gotten to know John well in the short time I've been in Washington, and he comes from kind of a background similar to our backgrounds. Just a regular guy who today finds himself in a kind of irregular and exceptional position, and he's a straight shooter. I mean, what you see is what you get. You don't have to guess what is on John Boehner's mind, and so I have come to consider him a friend. I don't always agree, obviously, on every topic, and I feel, feel free to first and foremost vote my district and the folks that I represent. And when I do that, I look forward to having those conversations with the speaker why I disagree with him.
And that's one thing. Let's talk about that. You don't always agree with them, but yet you have to find that way to work together. And with the Senate staying in Democratic hands with Majority Leader Reid and also with President Obama, what's the way for all three groups, the Congress, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House to work together in the next 2 years on passing meaningful legislation?
Well, I think that's to keep focused on problem solving versus politics. And that doesn't always happen. I mean, I was sitting in my office watching the was supposed to be a press conference that the president did on New Year's Eve, and it looked more like a pep rally, and it wasn't helpful in the process that we were going through. It didn't help to build trust, and you need to work with trust, and you have to be focused on trying to find proper solutions to the really challenging problems that this nation is facing. So that would be my first word of advice for both bodies, House and Senate, and to the White House, is let's come to the table and work in finding viable solutions to the problems that we're facing. There'll be some things we will never agree on, and I accept that, and I'm okay with it. But where we can find common interests, that's how we get to viable solutions.
Well, this next topic, I think, could be one. It's going to fit into that category somewhere. And with what happened in Connecticut, gun control is a major thing that's on the minds of a lot of people right now. Where do you think this is going to go in D.C.?
See, I think that's exactly a reflection of what I was talking about, because the topic of discussion should be the instance of violence. Gun control is something that some folks, including the president, have jumped right into because it fulfills an agenda that they've always had in terms of weakening and taking away our Second Amendment rights. I would argue that not always, but there are times of violence that occur because we have corrupted and weakened the Second Amendment. We have, to some extent, illegally taken away rights that were supposedly provided to us under the Bill of Rights to be able to defend ourselves, defend our state, defend our nation. That's the whole idea behind of the Second Amendment rights. And where these evil individuals, these perpetrators that conduct these violent acts, they know that there are segments of the American citizens that can't defend themselves today because of gun control laws that have gone on the books. And this should be about violence. Now, there's going to be a real push for gun control. I happen to believe that any new gun laws, and we have plenty of them, they're only going to impact law-abiding citizens. It's going to negatively impact what should be a guarantee under the Second Amendment. It's a broad topic, though. We should be focused on violence and what are the motivations behind this. I think we need to look at behavioral health, mental health. I worked mental health for many years. Quite frankly, if you've got a mental health illness, you usually were limited to about 10 in your lifetime of days of being hospitalized. There are just a lot of things we need to look at with mental health. There's also the whole culture that's created by TV and video games and movies that desensitize people, and I think largely the vulnerable folks who have mental illness or just have evil in their heart. It almost trains them on how to conduct violence. I revert back to two incidents. One in 2001 that we all vividly remember, where a handful of individuals with evil in their heart killed over 3,000 men, women, and children, essentially with box cutters and airplanes. And most recently, the most recent mass murder in China was done with knives. And so it's not the method. We have to look at the motivation, and I'm hoping that's something we have a serious discussion on.
Well, now that Vice President Biden has been picking up this group and sort of talking with a lot of groups, and the other thing is state laws versus federal laws. Should gun laws be federal or state? What do you think?
Well, I think largely, the way that it works is the rights start as individuals. And I believe, as the founders did, that most rights we retain. They're inalienable. We received them from our Creator. We have the rights to do these things. Beyond that, some of the rights are delegated to the state, but then even fewer are delegated to the federal level. So I do believe that since it is in our Constitution about Second Amendment rights, that is really the overall guiding principle when it comes to our access to own and bear arms.
Do you think there's a move by the president that he will circumvent the House and Senate and try and do it with the executive decision?
Well, I think the best predictor of future performance is past performance, and we have seen that time and time again, what he tries to do through rulemaking, through the agencies that have no authority, no congressional authority, no legislation that has been passed. And so, yeah, I have a tremendous concern of what he's going to try to do to step on the rights of the American citizens. I think it's very limited what he should be able to do. But we'll see if, hopefully he doesn't. If he chooses to abuse his power, I think he's going to have a, there's going to be he's going to have a real fight on his hands in terms of with Congress.
That's a good stopping point for us. Right. When we come back, we're going to talk about his future plans and the committees he's going to be on in the next 2 years. You're watching For the Record on WHVL. Welcome back to For the Record. Our guest is Congressman Glenn Thompson. Congressman, 13 of 19 of our congressional districts this past year voted for Republicans in a year where President Obama won the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. There's been some talk in Harrisburg about changing the way we select our electoral votes to go to the person who wins a state. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, let me say we now have the 4th largest delegation in the Republican conference, and it's a good delegation.
Of 50 states,
of 50 states, and we work well together, and I'm real pleased to welcome the 2 new members that came on board. So I believe that there is room for change, and what I would like to see is probably based on percentage-wise, proportionally. I think that best respects the intent of the founders. It still protects the small states to have a say within the electoral college. But for example, if an individual wins 55% of the vote in Pennsylvania, then 55% of first of all, since they won the majority, they would take the 2 that go with the Senate seats. Right. But of the remaining 19 seats, they basically would take 55% of those. I think that respects the whole principle of one person, one vote, and that's something that's completely up to the state legislature to pursue.
Now, your assignments coming up this year, have you been assigned your different committees that you'll be on for the next 2 years? I
have. I'm going to continue with the Natural Resource Committee, continue with the Agriculture Committee, and specifically as chairman of Conservation, Energy, and Forestry. We had a little bit of a expansion of jurisdiction there, and also the Education and Workforce Committee. And then I will be continuing to chair as the National Congressional Co-Chair of the Career and Technical Education Caucus. Incredibly important. Lots of jobs that we need to fill as the baby boomers retire, and picking up some new responsibilities as co-chair of the Natural Gas Caucus for Congress.
Well, that's a good place for us to start. Natural gas, very big in our area, and it's a nice tie into agriculture as well, because a lot of farmers who have not been making money in years past, especially in your district, because of the high price of feed, et cetera, natural gas has given them an opportunity to make some money.
Well, to stay in farming.
Sure.
First and foremost, yeah. We see an attrition of farming at an alarming rate, where grounds become housing developments or parking lots or strip malls. And the fact is that we've lost, between 2001 and 2008, we lost 30% of our dairy farms in this nation. And I know 2009, 2010 were not good years for dairy farms. We lost more. And so the natural gas that God has blessed us with, and a lot of it sits underneath these rural fields and lands, really has allowed a lot of farmers to keep farming during difficult times. And that's important because, well, first and foremost, the biggest threat to our national security is when we would depend on another country for our food supply.
And also, with that area, we've talked about, you and I personally, about our children being educated and having to look somewhere else. Let's talk about careers and technology, what we need to do with our education workforce to keep kids here and also for our workers here.
Yeah, our number one export, and we export a lot, our number one exporters are our young folks. You know, we raise them, we send them to school, and then they wind up leaving the state, the area and the state, and that's wrong. And that's stopping. We're seeing, that's exciting for especially our rural communities, where we're seeing our sons and daughters find opportunities here at home, and these are good paying jobs. And they say a rising tide floats all boats, and it does. It's just not the people who are doing petroleum engineering or actual drilling, but it's been good for all the businesses and industries. It's provided every citizen who uses natural gas in this great state with an affordable, clean, and domestically produced energy source. It has been, it just has been very good, and there are a lot of exciting opportunities. But we do need, we do need a qualified and trained workforce in order to, not just for that industry, but all industries. Our biggest threat to manufacturing really is is the number one asset really is a qualified and trained worker. And that's something I'm dedicated to with my work on the Education Workforce Committee, and specifically with the Career and Technical Education Caucus.
And there's a shortage of two-year degree people right here in this region, correct?
Two-year degree, certificate training, all across the board. And part of that is the mindset that we've had, and trust me, I'm a huge fan of Penn State. I'm an alumni, proud to be a Penn Stater. And we are blessed with four-year colleges, but career and technical education training, not so much. And I happen to believe that there is many different pathways to success in life. One of the big problems, I think, inherent flaws of No Child Left Behind, it was based on the premise that every child, when they graduate high school, are going to go into a four-year college. And that's just not true, nor is it fair, because every child has different gifts. And as we work in education, whether it's as a legislator or a teacher or administrator or school board member or parents, our goal should be to develop the individual gifts of each child. And so I'm very proud to work with the career and technical education schools.
Let's talk about healthcare quickly, about what your goals are for the next 2 years in healthcare.
Well, we've got a lot of things that we need to do. We're going to be talking healthcare a very long time. My principles I follow on that are the ones I follow when I practice healthcare for 30 years. It needs to be affordable. It needs to be accessible. We need to make sure we have quality and innovation. And we also always need to keep the patient making decisions in consultation with their physician. And so there's a lot of things out there that I have worked on. I had legislation called the STEP Act that was the President of the United States signed that increased access for our military using telemedicine. Right now, I have a bill we're reintroducing that I'm pretty confident we're going to be successful with. That will do the same thing for our veterans through the Veterans Administration. And there's no shortage of things that we need to do to address the healthcare issue.
Real quickly, Congressman, where are your offices located?
My office is 2 district offices, one on the Boehner Pike between Bellefonte State College, and then one in Titusville. Then I have the most important part of my operation are the qualified and talented staff spread throughout the 5th District.
Congressman, thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank
You've
you.
been watching For the Record. Our guest is Congressman Thompson. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.